Ken, you just got back from the GM meetings. I know there's a lot of buzz around those meetings. Some of it is earwash, some of it is legit stuff. What was the vibe around it? Tell us.
There's a lot of eyewash. There's no question about it, Trisha. But what's different about the meetings these days, the GM meetings, is that teams are still very busy staffing, hiring coaches to be with their new managers. In one case, the Colorado Rockies, they still need to hire a manager. So a lot of GMs and baseball operations types are occupied with that. But at the GM meetings, generally, they do generally start to talk about players. Meetings take place between teams and agents for free agents, and meetings take place or conversations take place between heads of baseball operations for different clubs. So you'll often hear after the fact that the groundwork was laid for this deal or this trade at the winter meeting or at the GM meetings. And that is kind of the function of them. What has changed a little bit, as I mentioned, is that a lot of the teams are still occupied with finding coaches. And it's been a kind of a crazy offseason in that way with 9 new managers being hired.
Okay, let's talk a little. Go ahead. Go
Oh
ahead.
no, sorry. Does it give you a chance to sit there and go, okay, I'm rekindling these conversations for you, or are you like, yeah, I could probably have just texted this person?
Actually, Eric, it's a great question you ask. I could text everybody,
Yeah.
and you might even say the GM meetings and the winter meetings are obsolete for that reason. However, you do get to see people in person, and it's nice to see people you haven't seen in a long time, not just GMs and agents, but also writers. And from that perspective, there is that human face-to-face element. We don't get a lot of FaceTime with these guys. They're kind of busy, and they give us 1 hour of availability with the American League heads of baseball operations, and then 1 hour with the National League on different days. But I always think there's value, much more value to talking to someone face-to-face than texting them. I'm old school.
Ken, question for you. I know baseball is a little bit different in its free agency because we don't have a salary cap, but what's stopping teams from just making things happen? Saying, I want Edwin Díaz and just going to get him the first day of free agency. I know there's arbitration. I know there's qualifying offers teams have to figure out, but we have smart people. You could kind of figure out your salary, what these projected arbitration numbers are going to be. Maybe if a guy gets a qualifying offer. But why is baseball the only sport when free agency opens, nothing ever happens?
Kevin, this is a great question. A lot of fans have this question too. Why does this drag on for 3 months? Now, some fans actually like it because baseball remains in the news rather than having free agency over in 4 days. But it seems to me that the reason the calendar works like it does and the pace is what it is because there's no deadline. And when we have the trade deadline, you see action and you see the action peaking on the last day because the deadline is driving that movement. We don't have that in baseball. And for whatever reason, these things seem to go at their own pace. The winter meetings are often a center of activity, but even then, only certain things happen there, not everything. And you'll see deals drag into late December, January, even February. It's just the way baseball works. I don't like it. I don't know that anyone in the sport likes it. Actually, there are a lot of people on all sides of the spectrum, media, baseball operations, agents, everyone would like to see this compressed, at least in terms of their own personal lives. But the union does not want to set any deadlines because they believe that restricts the market somehow. I would argue that maybe it would drive the market, but that's always been the union's position. No restrictions on the market whatsoever.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow up. Could they implement a deadline? And then the other question is, I feel like from a player's perspective, we always kind of assume that the longer you waited, the fear became on the player to the pressure to sign
Yes.
maybe a deal. Do you think there's a way around either of those two things?
As for a deadline, there have been ideas floated. It would have to be collectively bargained. Both the players and the teams, the owners, would have to agree upon it. And it would seem to me that it could be structured in a way where it worked for everyone. Maybe you have a trade deadline at the winter meetings where no trades after the end of the winter meetings, and then the free agent market would open up right then. There are all kinds of ways you could do it. And Kevin, there's no question, too, that teams use the calendar to their advantage. They wait and wait and wait and try to squeeze certain segments of the market. Maybe there are an excess number of relievers that, hey, if we just wait, these guys are going to panic and they'll sign for less. There is no doubt that that takes place.
Ken, I just want to say that I agree with you on the old school face to face stuff. I don't ever want to go back to the pandemic. You remember when we couldn't even see anybody face to face? And there is a
Right.
value. I teach my students that all the time. I'm like, it's so valuable to be face to face with the people that you cover. There's just something about talking to them in person. So I'm glad that the GM meetings are still in person and the winter meetings are still in person. And you can't just text these guys all the time. I mean, you can blow up their phone if you want to, but face to face is always better. Let's talk a little bit about what you just wrote, Ken, about the Mets. With Edwin Díaz on the market, you said a perfect storm is brewing for the Mets to lose him. We know that he's testing free agency the first time. He wants that payday. We also know what has been said from the Mets, not afraid to replace him by diving into a large market for closers right now. What's the latest?
The latest is what Edwin Díaz said last night at the MLB Awards, which is that he's 50-50 to re-sign with the Mets. Now, Trisha, obviously, and you know this, everyone knows this, at this time of year, there's only so much you can believe about what is coming out of anyone's mouth, and it's kind of up to people like me to figure out what's real and what isn't. Now, what's real here is Toronto, the Blue Jays, want to add high leverage reliever and a starting pitcher. Not necessarily in that order. The starter actually is the priority right now. But we all saw what happened in Game 7 of the World Series. 2 outs away, Jeff Hoffman gives up the home run to Miguel Rojas. A closer for the Blue Jays would make a ton of sense, and they are motivated right now to do things. We know that. We also know that David Stearns, as president of baseball operations of the Mets, is a guy who is disciplined. He adheres to, or tries to, certain thresholds for certain players. He doesn't want to go above. He will in response to the market, but if a team pushes the Mets, and it doesn't have to be the Blue Jays. I focused on them for the most part in this column, but it could be the Yankees, it could be the Tigers, it could be the Braves, it could be the Dodgers. Any number of teams might say, you know what, I really want Edwin Díaz. Now, he's a reliever, and relievers making $100 million over the course of a contract over 5 years, that's a risk. There's no question about that, and Edwin Díaz is going to pitch next season at 32. But as we know, all it takes in free agency is one team. And Díaz has been that good. He's by far the best closer on this market, that maybe one team jumps. And then that's the perfect storm. If it's the Blue Jays, for instance, a team that is motivated, when you have a proud player who wants to be recognized for what he has achieved. He had a great deal the last time, but he wants a similar type deal this time. And then you have a Mets team that, yes, of course, with Steve Cohen as their owner, might just simply say, we'll pay him whatever we need to pay him, but not necessarily. So all of these things, I don't know that any of it will take place, Trisha, but what I wanted to outline in this article, and I know there were some people in the comments saying, what's the point here? It's clickbait. It's the usual trolling. But there is a point. And the point is, here is a scenario. Here are the situations at hand in this particular case and how it might develop.
Kratz Pop Quiz. What has 35 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, 27 essential vitamins and minerals, comes in excellent flavors like, of course, chocolate, vanilla, but chocolate peanut butter, my favorite. No added sugar, gluten-free, under $5 per meal, and is ready to drink.
Go out the house, get yourself a Huel. Look at you. You even have one right there. Ready to smack that, John? Chocolate peanut butter, chocolate, and vanilla. Deliciosos.
Also, there is a new Daily Greens ready to drink. 42 vitamins, minerals, and superfoods. Only 25 calories on that one. 4 grams of fiber. There's flavors like blueberry, apple, peach. Huel makes healthy eating simple. They also just launched into Target stores nationwide. Try both products today with 15% off your purchase for new customers with the code FOUL at huel.com/FOUL. Use that code FOUL and fill out the post-checkout survey to help support FT.
Does the amount of people on the market, not just people, the amount of high-end, Robert Suarez, the fact that now I guess Pete Fairbanks would be below Suarez and Devin Williams and Edwin, does that make the closer, I don't even call it the reliever market because everybody says they need a reliever. Does that make the closer market the one that's possibly going to go first because of as much high-end talent. If there was just one guy, then it would be like, I can drag this out. I'm the absolute bee's knees here.
Possibly, Eric. And I say
Right.
possibly because it's always impossible to predict how this is all going to play out. But I would think that if a team jumps out on one of these guys, this is often the case. What happens in free agency, you see a run on closers. You might see a run on middle relievers at one point, on outfielders. So, yes, it's possible that this happens quickly. And it's also possible that teams posture and they wait, and the players wait as well for what they want, and they're not getting it. And this drags out for however long it might drag out. So it's really hard to predict timing. Obviously, with no deadline, it's really difficult. So I'm not sure exactly how it might go. But if you're asking, is there a world in which this kind of starts to happen going into the winter meetings and right after? Yes, I would think that is the case.
I want to beat a dead horse. I want to go back to our previous conversation. Do players, agents, and even executives feel like they lose leverage if they just have a little bit of transparency? Like, what's the harm in a team coming out and say, we'd love to trade for Tarik Skubal? Like, whether you do it or not, that's whatever happens behind closed doors. But why does everything have to be so cryptic?
Actually, Kevin, I have an answer for that. With regard to trades, it's tampering when you openly say you want another team's player. With regard to free agency, there are rules in the collective bargaining agreement about how teams cannot talk in certain ways about free agents. The reason for those rules is that from the collusion era, which took place in the late 80s, early 90s, and has flared up again from time to time even since, public statements were sometimes used against players, and when teams would say we're out, that would be an effect on the market, and that is why those rules are in place. So we don't have transparency, and teams try to be as careful as they can, and agents and players too, for the most part, with regard to what they're doing. Now, you will see, sometimes it's coming from an agent, a report saying team X, Y, and Z are interested in player C. That can happen, and often it does come from the agent, but for the most part, it's pretty tightly kept, all of these desires of teams, and leverage is the reason, and also the rules that I just stated. That's the other reason.
Ken, where you live, there is no rules. So we can ask you whatever we want to ask you. So
Oh,
I'm going to
yeah.
go to the starting pitching market, and not so much free agency, more the hot debate of the trade market, because we saw what the Red Sox got when they got Garrett Crochet last year. They got the number 2 in the Cy Young. But ironically, number 1 in Cy Young, Tarik Skubal, has been rumored. Where do you see this market going? And are there other names that are clearly below Skubal, but have not been pushed out there yet?
Well, this is an interesting conversation going on right now, and it was going on at the meetings about which starting pitchers might actually get traded. And I wrote about this in a notes column earlier this week. So the Tigers are saying they don't want to trade Tarik Skubal. The Brewers are saying we're not trading Freddy Peralta. Of course, Paul Skeens is not getting traded. Even the Twins with Joe Ryan are saying we'd like to build around Joe Ryan rather than just peddle him. There are some teams that believe, teams that are interested in these pitchers, that these other clubs, the clubs with the starting pitchers, are merely posturing, and that at this appropriate time, they will certainly open up the conversations to a greater extent than they are now. And in the Tigers case, for instance, it's just a matter of, okay, we'll play hard to get, and then boom, strike a big deal. That could happen. But the Tigers, from what I understand, what they're saying, at least right now, and it might be BS, for lack of a better phrase. But what they're saying right now is we want to win in our last year with Tarik Skubal. We do not want to trade him. And it would send a pretty bad message to their fan base if after 2 years of making the playoffs with Skubal being the centerpiece of the team, that suddenly they shipped him out for pieces that probably wouldn't be having the same kind of immediate impact. So I actually believe the Tigers likely will not trade Tarik Skubal. In some of these other cases, I do wonder if trades ultimately will occur. I also believe Peralta is not going to move. The Brewers have been public and adamant about that. But again, we'll see as the winter progresses. Once the free agents come off the board, Framber Valdez, Ranger Suarez, Dylan Cease, once those top guys are no longer available, then the pressure might mount on those teams to make trades from the teams that got shut out in free agency.
Maybe so. Sounds like you'd have to offer your firstborn to the Tigers if you want Skubal. All right, again, let's move on to another topic that's been hot recently. What information, before you have to go real quick, are you hearing about the Padres and the selling of their team?
Not much. It just got announced yesterday by the team that they will explore a sale. And as I mentioned yesterday, I believe on my own program, that it's kind of been pointing toward this once Peter Seidler passed away. And you see the tweet right there from Kyle Glazer. Padres chairman John Seidler announces in a letter to fans that the family has decided to begin a process of evaluating our future with the Padres, including a potential sale of the franchise. Now, one thing I didn't mention yesterday, and it's worth mentioning, we've seen in recent years the Twins come up for sale, the Angels come up for sale, and the Nationals come up for sale and ultimately get pulled off the market. Now, the Orioles were sold, the Rays were sold, there were other transactions. Cleveland took on a path to control with minority investors. But just because a team says it wants to sell doesn't guarantee a sale will take place. Now, with the Padres, you have the widow of Peter Seidler suing two of his brothers, and it would seem to me that that alone is motivating this perhaps. But who knows if the Padres get their price with the CBA expiring in December 1st, 2026, with all of the TV contracts in baseball still unsettled, the national TV contracts beyond 2028, and also a lot of local deals. The Padres have been hurt because they were one of the teams that had their local deal pulled out from under them. So whether a sale happens or not, it's difficult to say, but the intent seems to be there, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out, Trisha, because the Padres are a team that, while they're having difficulties on the TV side that a lot of other teams are having too, man, they're drawing $3 million a year. They are booming in San Diego. An owner or prospective owner might want to get in on that.